Okay, perfect. I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Avery. I'm the brand manager here at SheMed, and we are very excited to have Dr. Zoe Schaedel with us here tonight. She is a menopause and sleep specialist, and she's also the co-founder of both Myla Health and the Good Sleep Clinic. So we're very excited to have her for tonight's webinar. Zoe, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm Zoe Schaedel. My background is I've been a GP in the UK for about 20 years, but I've really had a special interest in both sleep and women's health. And so I've done lots of extra training in sleep, and now I mostly work in women's health with Myla Health, but also seeing people with sleep problems. So every day I try to help people fix their sleep. And as part of Myla Health, we also work with organisations to help organisations improve the health of their teams, and sleep is often a big part of that. So sleep is something I'm working with every single day. Right, I'm going to just share my slides now. Bear with me. Right. Hopefully you can all see that. So we're going to have a whistle-stop tour tonight of sleep, everything that you need to know. And what we're going to cover is what is sleep? Why does it matter? How much do you need? And then we're going to really dive into some details about how sleep works. And the reason for that is if we can understand how sleep works, we can help ourselves get better quality and quantity of sleep. We're going to really cover lots of practical strategies that help you to optimize your sleep. And we're also going to think a little bit about when sleep goes wrong. So there's various sleep disorders, and we're going to cover the most common ones and what we can do about it. So, what is sleep? And it's actually really difficult to describe it accurately. And there's quite a lot about sleep we still don't know. But it is a time when essentially we're not conscious, we're not alert, we're not aware of things going on around us. But it's not the same as being unconscious or anesthetized, because during sleep, our brain moves in very specific ways. So most adults spend about a third of their life asleep. And during sleep, our brain cycles through different stages with different types of brain waves every 90 minutes on average. And it's doing a lot for us, our sleep. So, what is healthy sleep? How do we know if we're getting good enough sleep? And there's some things we look for in sleep to know if it's good enough. First of all, we should fall asleep fairly quickly, so within about 30 minutes, but actually not too quickly. So if you get into bed and you fall asleep as soon as your head hits the pillow, that's probably means you're underslept a bit. So anything 5 minutes, 7 minutes, that's probably a bit too short, and it suggests you might benefit from a bit more sleep. But if it's more than 30 minutes, that can become a problem. None of us really like lying there for a long time waiting for sleep to happen. Ideally, we'd sleep continuously through the night. And this is often something people struggle with. Um, and again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. A few little wakings are okay, but we don't want to be awake for very much of the night. We want people to feel like they've had enough sleep. And so waking too early, now that's going to depend on an individual. Some people like waking early. But if you feel like you're waking too early for you, then that's a problem. And ideally, you would feel refreshed the next day when you wake up. And this is always a hard one because when you first wake up, it's actually quite difficult to feel refreshed. And most people feel a bit groggy. And so we don't judge it on that very first waking. That's something called sleep inertia. We can often feel a bit groggy and tired. But about half an hour to an hour later, we should feel pretty alert, pretty ready to go, get on with our day. And if we're not, and we don't get that refreshment from sleep, then it could be that our sleep is a problem. And when we're talking about healthy sleep, we're often talking about efficient sleep. And what that means is most of the time that you are in bed, you should be asleep. And for a healthy sleeper, we actually look for sleep efficiency of about 95%. So that means that almost as soon as you get into bed, shortly after, you're going to be asleep. You're going to be asleep for most of the night, and then you're going to wake up and get up. So you're not going to be lying in bed awake. But there are some types of sleep problem where people are actually awake quite a lot during the night, and we call that inefficient sleep. And we usually want to do something about it. What you can see on the right is talking about these cycles. So I mentioned that most adults, their brain moves through cycles every 90 minutes. And you might have heard of these different types of sleep. So we often refer to deep sleep and rapid eye movement sleep. Now, what you can see on this little graph, it's called a hypnogram. And you can see that REM, rapid eye movement sleep, is in the dark blue bars. And then the other stages of sleep are divided up into N1, N2, and N3. And all that means is they're not rapid eye movement. So you have N1, which is really light sleep, N2, which is also light sleep, and then N3, which is that deep sleep. And we sometimes call that deep restorative sleep. So what happens when you first fall asleep? You move from being alert and awake straight into the lightest type of sleep. You can really easily wake up from it. Then you move into N2, and then you go into N3, which is the type of sleep where it would be hard to wake you. And lots of important processes happen in that deep sleep. So it's where lots of kind of rest and recovery of your muscles, bit of recovery of your brain function occurs. And what you can see if you look along the night, not every 90-minute cycle is the same. So in the first half of the night, we get much more of that deep N3 sleep. And then in the second half of the night, we get more rapid eye movement sleep. So you can almost divide the night into two halves. And it's why, if you are going to fall asleep, the first half of the night is the time you're less likely to wake up. So you might manage a few hours at the beginning of the night and then struggle a bit later on. So the sleep's much lighter later on in the night. It's a different type of sleep. They're all important. They all have functions, these types of sleep. And how much sleep should we be getting? And there's often quite a focus on a number of hours. And in the media, it's often sort of said that 8 hours sleep is what we should all be aiming for. And that's really, really not true. So there isn't one number that's right for everybody. It really varies, just like our size, our shape, our blood pressure, all sorts of things. It varies. The reason that 8 hours is talked about in the media, it's kind of in the middle of the range that we think people need. And I think this is a really good table. So this comes from the National Sleep Foundation in America. And what you can see is the ideal amount of sleep varies over our lifespan. So it's very different from young children, teenagers, adults. And if you look at the adults, it says what most adults really need is between 7 and 9 hours. But actually, the little turquoise bars either side of that show that some adults might need 6 hours and some might need 10. So there's a huge amount of variation. And the only way we really know how much sleep we need as an individual is to see how we feel. So if you're feeling really tired, are you getting enough? Perhaps you need a bit more. And if you find that you get to a point where you can't sleep more, perhaps you're getting what you need as long as you feel refreshed enough in the day. So it really does vary. And you can see as we get a bit older, so older adults over 65, the expectation is slightly lower. And it's a bit like everything. As we age, different centers of our body struggle to do what they need to do. And it's the same with our sleep centers in our brain. People don't get quite as much sleep as they age, but often that's okay. And people still feel refreshed on slightly less. And when we're thinking about that quantity of sleep, we also need to think about quality. So the quality of sleep might be feeling like you've had continuous sleep, like you haven't woken up a lot, or that you can sense you've had a good amount of deep sleep, restorative sleep. So it's not just about the hours, it's also about the type of sleep we get. So why are we even bothering to talk about sleep? What does it actually do for us? And I really love this quote. I use it in all of my talks, which is if sleep does not serve an absolutely vital function, then it's the biggest mistake the evolutionary process ever made. And it's because for thousands and thousands of years, humans have needed exactly the same amount of sleep. And while we're asleep, we're not doing anything useful at all. We're not working, we're not finding a mate, we're not eating, we're not finding food. And so, if we could do without sleep, evolution would have allowed us to do without sleep. But we can't. We need exactly the same as we did in caveman times. And it's because it's actually doing essential work for our body and our mind. So there are loads of things that sleep does, but we don't have all the time in the world. So I'm going to focus on just a few areas that I think affect us on a day-to-day basis. And I think they sort of, when you're thinking about them, you will know that these are areas that sleep can affect. And the first one is sleep and memory. So sleep's absolutely essential for memory. In that deep sleep, that N3 stage of sleep, we take all the experiences and the learning from the day and we literally store it in our hard drive. So we take it from the kind of superficial outer bits of the brain and store it. And so you can imagine if we miss out on that type of sleep, it's much harder to learn and to remember. We know that if you get the right amount and the right type of sleep, we get better brain function. So I'm sure all of you will have had nights of not good sleep. The next day, you feel a bit groggy, a bit foggy. You can't take things in. You're not as focused. You can't remember as well. You can't remember names or words. You can't work things out so easily. And sleep is important for all those processes. But it's not just our day-to-day memory that it impacts. It also impacts our long-term brain health. And during that deep sleep, that N3 sleep, we think that it's having an important cleansing effect on the brain. So during the day, our brain uses up energy all the time, with all the things we're doing, we're thinking, and you get these kind of waste products from that activity building up in the brain. There are these proteins. Now, those proteins, if you get too high levels of them that build up over time, they can cause brain problems and brain dysfunction. And during sleep, those proteins are kind of washed away. And so, what we think is it's probably really important to have those aspects of sleep to wash those proteins away. And if we don't, then we're at a higher risk of dementia. So, we know that people who have short sleep are at an increased risk of having Alzheimer's disease. So, what is short sleep? What's too short sleep? And again, that's going to vary between individuals, but we tend to use a cutoff of 6 hours in our research on sleep. So, anything over 6 hours, it might not be enough for you, but it's not considered short sleep. But if you're consistently getting less than 6 hours a night, there is a chance that you're not going through all these processes to keep your brain as healthy as it needs to be. So, moving on from our thinking to how we feel. And I certainly think this is probably the biggest aspect of sleep problems that has an impact on people day to day. And we know that another part of sleep is extremely important in our mental health, in keeping our emotions on track. And actually, we think this is more in the rapid eye movement sleep, so in that second half of the night. And during rapid eye movement sleep, if we've experienced difficult things in the day, stressful things, hard decisions or trauma of any kind, our brain has this kind of filtering effect on those experiences. So you can still remember them, but it takes out the kind of emotional attachment with those memories. So the next day, you just don't get that same kind of emotional reaction. And part of this process is helping us to regulate our emotions. And if we don't get enough sleep, we can be more emotional. And again, I bet that's something that lots of you have experienced. If you just have, an all-nighter or you just for some reason you can't sleep, the next day you're much more likely to be reactive or irritable or tearful. And so we know that that kind of emotional regulation is very important. One of the problems with sleep and mental health is it works both ways. And we see this with sleep in a number of different elements of life. So if we're not sleeping enough, we can be more emotional, struggle with how we feel a bit more. And often that leads to this kind of build up of anxiety. And annoyingly, when you have more anxiety, it then becomes harder to sleep. So, anxiety usually is associated with an increase in kind of stress hormones, cortisol rises. And this state is the exact opposite of what we need to sleep. So, when we sleep, we need our body to feel very safe and very calm because essentially it's quite vulnerable. So, again, from evolution, if we're sleeping, we could be attacked. We could be attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. And so we need to know that it's very safe and that our body has to have a low heart rate, low cortisol, low breathing rate. Actually, our temperature drops as well. So everything has to kind of drop down for us to go to sleep. So if we're struggling with anxiety, this can really get in the way. These elements of our brain function really affect the way people function at work. And there's massive studies showing that sleep disruption is costing, the economy millions and even billions of pounds. And actually, that's why businesses have become much more interested in sleep. So we often get asked to go in and talk all about how an organization might improve the sleep of its employees. That's partly because it's really important for the way business works. And this picture of the brain, I think it's really important thinking about the way that sleep affects us. So you can see here in the pink, there's the prefrontal cortex. And that's the part of the brain that helps us with our impulse control. So it helps us be logical and make sensible decisions. Um, and this aspect of the brain is extremely sensitive to sleep loss. So if we're awake at night, our prefrontal cortex is just too lazy, it doesn't activate. But what does activate is our amygdala. And this is that more primitive aspect of the brain that triggers more emotional thinking and decision making. So if you have chronic sleep loss, your prefrontal cortex isn't giving you the balance that you need. So often people are more impulsive, less logical, less strategic, more risk taking, and often relying on that more kind of reactive aspect of the brain. I always think this is really interesting if you're someone that does wake up at night. And if you wake up at night, it's horrible being awake and it's dark and everyone else is asleep. But also, our type of thinking isn't the same as in the daytime. So, like often we'll hear people say, I was worrying so much about this last night, but today it doesn't feel like it's such a problem. And it's because you're thinking without all of your brain being active. So, I always try and say at nighttime, it's just not a good time to think. Our brain cannot function as well as it would in the daytime. They do lots of interesting experiments with sleep, and it usually involves taking two groups of people, and one group get a good night's sleep, a normal night's sleep, and the other group are sleep deprived. You can imagine it must be absolutely awful to be in that group. But there have been really interesting studies on leaders and bosses in organizations and taking these two groups where some of them get to sleep normally and some get disturbed sleep. So they either get woken after 4 hours or they get woken frequently throughout the night with a very annoying noise. And this brilliant study here, they got people to rate presentations from these two different groups of leaders. It was absolutely fascinating that the leaders that hadn't had good sleep and the audience didn't know that, they were actually rated as less charismatic and less inspiring by about 10%, which is quite significant. So there's really good reasons why trying to help our leaders get better sleep can really improve productivity and performance in organizations. And then on to sleep and weight. And this is a huge topic, but I think it's super important as I know many of you are going to be on a weight loss journey of some kind. So, sleep is intrinsically linked to weight and weight management in lots of different ways. First of all, we know that during sleep, different appetite regulating hormones get their regulation. So, what we see is leptin is a hormone released by fat cells, and it gives our brain the messages that you're full, and its opposite number, ghrelin, tells your brain that you're hungry. And what happens if you don't sleep enough is the balance of these hormones change. So again, less than 6 hours sleep, we see a significant reduction in leptin levels and a significant increase in ghrelin. So you get this kind of double effect where you feel less full and less satisfied, and actually you want to eat more and you want to have more food. And it's really unfair, but we think the reason is that if you're sleep deprived, you're giving your brain the message that you're in some kind of emergency situation. So your body thinks, well, why? Why would they be sleep deprived? Who would do that to themselves? There must be an emergency. We must start storing fat and energy for the difficult situation that we're about to meet. So we know that as a result of these hormone imbalances, people who are having short sleep will consume more calories. And it's on average about 385 calories a day extra, just if you're sleeping less. We also know that people are more likely to pick more unhealthy foods. And that's partly because of that lack of prefrontal cortex there, trying to regulate us and trying to make us really sensible and logical. So more likely to eat sugary foods, carbohydrates, salty foods. And then even more unfairly, when we don't have enough sleep, when we lose weight, when we manage to lose weight, we actually lose our weight from the areas we don't want to lose it from. So we lose our muscle mass and not our fat mass. And again, it's probably for a similar reason. Our body is trying to store fat for a kind of a future emergency situation. But this is incredibly unfair. So, when people successfully manage to lose weight without sleep, it's often not in the way that they want to. And again, we said about the reduced impulse control. So, if sleep is doing such a good job and it's so important, why are we even bothering to talk about it? Surely everyone would just get the sleep that they need. But the statistics really suggest that's not the case. And there's a couple of really interesting surveys that I think are quite shocking. So, 71% of UK adults don't get the 7 to 9 hours per night. So when we looked at that table, the recommended amount is 7 to 9, but actually most of us aren't getting that. About 14% of adults survive on less than 5 hours a night. And there's almost no one that won't have some kind of negative effect from this. So there are some very, very short sleepers genetically, but they are a tiny, tiny percentage of the population. So the majority of that group are going to be affected by that short sleep. We know that people that aren't sleeping well think that that sleep problem is affecting them in either their physical health or their mental health. And it's going to impact on your work, your productivity, your life. So we know that people are off work more, they're less productive at work. And also, when you ask people, they often think, well, actually, probably it's something I could do. So 30% think, well, yeah, I could actually improve my sleep if I had a better lifestyle, but there's things I'm doing that are getting in the way of good sleep. So I want to talk you through 3 areas of how sleep works because lots of the things we do to help sleep are directly related to these mechanisms. And if you understand them, you kind of get why we say some of the things that we do about helping sleep. So the first is our body clock. You will have heard of the circadian rhythm, our internal body clock. We actually have clocks in all of our cells, and they kind of have a timing that is best for everything to occur. So in our gut, we've got times it's best for us to eat because our enzymes are released in a certain way. But we have timings it's best to sleep. And it really matters because it's very individual. Again, this is something that varies hugely between people. So we call it the chronotype. And our chronotype is something that you're actually born with. This is genetic. You can't change it. You might be an early bird. You might be someone that loves, going to bed early, waking up early, or you might naturally be more of a night owl. But recognizing what chronotype you are can be really helpful because otherwise it can always feel like you're on the wrong timetable for you. And actually, what we call it is circadian misalignment. If your lifestyle isn't aligned with your natural body clock, that can make sleep harder and it can make other things harder as well. So, part of what we do when we work with someone with sleep is try and work out what is your natural body clock? What's your body trying to do? And then we can kind of work with it a little bit. So, that's the first thing, the body clock. The second thing is your nervous system. We talked a little bit about cortisol and anxiety getting in the way of sleep. And we think of our sympathetic nervous system as our fight, flight, or freeze system. And you can absolutely imagine if you're in that system, sleep is not going to be easy. So, again, we need to feel safe, we need to feel calm. So, what we want to be in is our parasympathetic nervous system activated. So, that is where we have lower levels of activation and our body can allow us to sleep. So, some of the things we do are about moving from one to the other. And this is the third element, and I think it's something that we're less likely to have heard of, but it's super important. And this is called sleep drive. So your sleep drive increases from the moment you wake up in the morning. And it's basically the longer you've been awake, the more sleepy you become. Okay. So what happens is we release something called adenosine from first thing in the morning. It builds up, it builds up, it builds up. By the time we get to our bedtime, it should be really high. We should feel really sleepy, and it helps us fall asleep and stay asleep. So, what we really want is high levels of adenosine before we go to bed. And there's different things we can do to increase our adenosine. So, being really active, physically and mentally, so working, having stimulating conversations, all of those things will increase this level of adenosine in our brain. And the other thing that will increase it is the amount of time you're awake. So, we want people to stay up late enough in order to have a really good level. So sometimes what we see, and I sometimes see this in menopause, is people are going to bed really early because they're so exhausted, but you never quite get those top levels of adenosine. And that sometimes we work on that. So this is something to just know about. So the other thing that kills your adenosine is as soon as you fall asleep, your adenosine levels drop. If that sleep is on the sofa in front of the telly, as soon as you shut your eyes, your adenosine levels drop. And when you wake up, go to bed, get into bed, they won't have been able to rise again to that really high level. So you'll never get that peak adenosine level. So falling asleep on the sofa is a real enemy, really something you don't want to do. Okay, so what can you do? Talked about all the issues. We want our sleep to be better. And I'm going to talk about three areas. One, review your sleep and prioritize it. Okay. Two, optimize your lifestyle. And three, if sleep is really going wrong, there are things that we can do to help. So seek support. Starting with reviewing your own sleep. So I think what I'd call it is a sleep stock take. Some of you might be having absolutely brilliant sleep and you don't need to do anything. But lots of us will know that actually, are you going to bed a bit late? Or are you waking up in the night? Are there things that aren't right with your sleep? Do you think you could get a bit more? Are you doing that thing where you're falling asleep as soon as your head hits the pillow and you know you need a little bit more? Or you're feeling tired as the day goes on, and again, it suggests you need a little bit more sleep. So you can do this in different ways. Sleep trackers, I get asked about these a lot. And if you are someone who gets pretty good sleep, but kind of knows there's things they could do to improve it, then having data can be really helpful. So I see this all the time is that when we have data on something, it helps us manage it. It helps us know what we're doing that can improve it and affect it. So there are all sorts of sleep trackers out there. Lots of you are going to have Apple Watches, there's Aura Rings, there's Whoop straps, Fitbits, all sorts of things out there. And they can be useful. So they can be useful at showing you what do you do that impacts on your sleep. So a classic, unfortunately for me, is that when I drink alcohol, my sleep quality isn't as good. So I can see that link. It makes it really easy for me to make some choices about what I want to do for my sleep. You don't have to have one of these. You can just do a sleep diary. They're brilliant. You can find them on the NHS website and you just write down in the morning. You don't need to do it overnight, but in the morning, how your sleep was last night when you woke up, blah, blah, blah. So These can be really useful if you are that sort of person that just thinks they could boost their sleep a bit. Where these aren't very useful is if you're struggling with your sleep. Okay, so if you have a sleep problem, you're waking up, you're not getting enough sleep, and you're trying, these really don't help because in the morning you can see that it's not good news, and it kind of affects our day to be greeted with that you didn't sleep well last night. So when we're working with people with poor sleep or sleep disorders, we take these off. So you've got to decide who you are and is this going to be helpful for you? Then what can you do? So if you're someone who would like to improve their sleep, usually, I mean, all of us can find something. So make sure your space is nice. Okay, so we want it to be like a lovely cave. So it's an area that you just sleep in. We don't want you doing loads of other stuff in your bedroom or in your bed. We want it to be really dark. So honestly, the number of people that I see with poor sleep that have got light coming in, light massively affects your sleep. Keep it dark. Some people use an eye mask. That can be good if you can tolerate that. And have it quiet. And if you have very sensitive sleep, you can use white noise or pink noise or even earplugs to try and help with that. So think about setting yourself up for success. Think about this transition. So we talked about the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Lots of us are, trying to be productive. We're getting things done in the evening. We're trying to manage our lives, and then we get into bed and expect to just switch off. But it's hard to do that. So you can make sure you have a little bit of a runway, a transition. It doesn't need to be long. It doesn't need to be like a 19-step spa relaxation routine. But having 15 to 30 minutes where you do just have a nice, relaxing environment, ideally not too bright light, do something that just tones things down. Everyone's going to be different. For some people, meditation can be brilliant. For others, it's just not going to work for you. So you've got to find something that's right for you. Reading can be good. Now, what about screens? There's loads of kind of screens are bad, screens give you blue light, and most of it is a myth. So, the blue light of screens does very, very little for our sleep. It's what's on it, it's what you're doing that's the problem. So, you have to decide again, something to reflect on. Are you scrolling? Are you just looking through your social media? Are you looking at emails or things that are going to keep your brain stimulated? Are you watching something that gets you really kind of adrenaline and worked up? Or are you using screens in a really relaxing way for you? I mean, they're brilliant. I love a bit of relaxing television before bed. And you've got to decide about the type of thing you're doing, and certainly something that really is relaxing for you, that you can switch off, and also that you can leave it and go to bed at the time you want, and it's not too addictive. That's really important. So just make good choices with screens. And the idea is that we get into a bit of a routine and a habit, and we form a ritual, and then we sort of learn that that then leads to sleep. Our temperature is very important for sleep. So, as part of our natural sleep process, we drop our temperature before we go to sleep. That's part of falling asleep. Everybody does. So, we can help that happen. We can keep our room lower than we think we need it. So, cooler is always better for sleep. Um, and we can even help it a bit further by having a hot bath or a hot shower. Because what happens is our core body temperature rises, you dilate your blood vessels, you give off that heat, and it makes your core body temperature drop. And that can kind of trigger this process into sleep. There was a little study showing that even using bed socks could help fall asleep better because it's encouraging heat out to your extremities. And the study was done in mice, which I thought that was a sort of sweet idea. But certainly something to think about. So you're just setting yourself up well. It's not going to be a surprise to you that caffeine can affect sleep. I think we all know this, but I think it's really interesting to know how it does it. And that sleep drive, that adenosine that builds up in the day, caffeine just blocks the effect of it. So it works really, really well. So it actually gets in the way of that sleepiness signal, and it just sits in the receptor and stops the adenosine working. And the problem is that's brilliant in the morning when you need a little pick me up. But if you use it later, it's still there at night waiting for any adenosine and stopping it working. So it really is. Caffeine's great, but try and keep it to the morning hours. Don't take it too late. Some people aren't sensitive at all, but lots of us are. So if you could do one thing, so when we see people in clinic with sleep problems, this is the first thing that we will look at. If people haven't tried to have a really regular routine, we will make them do that to start with. And this is because our body clock really needs a routine. So if we're going to bed at different times, if we're waking up at different times, if we're lying in because we had a bad night's sleep, all of that weakens the effect of our body clock. It's really powerful. So it's really hard to say we'll go to sleep at the same time every night. You can't do that. You can't force yourself to be asleep at 10:30 every night. But what you can do is set yourself a waking time every day because you can use an alarm. So what we would say is if you are struggling with sleep, be very consistent about your waking time, even on weekends. And we do allow a little bit of a lie-in, so up to an hour might be okay. I think even 90 minutes can disrupt things. So we actually call, if you have a long lie-in at the weekends, we call this social jet lag. It has a knock-on effect on your body clock, and it actually makes it really hard to then move back for when you need to be waking up early again. So be really careful with your routine. And if you're not sleeping well, could you improve that? Could you make it a little bit more regular? What about exercise? So, again, as part of a weight loss journey, I know this is going to be something that you've all been thinking about, but basically, all exercise is great for sleep. So, people who exercise regularly fall asleep faster and have better quality sleep in general. Um, does timing matter? We used to say avoid an exercise in the evening because it will make you hotter, but actually do it when you want. It will help usually, unless you're really sensitive to that heat. And it actually doesn't matter what you do. So there's some evidence that aerobic exercise is a bit better than strength training for sleep, but they all help. So just do what works for you. And actually, the one that wins for giving you the most sleep improvement is moderate intensity. So that's the one that gives the best increase in minutes and quality of sleep. So really anything you do, but it doesn't have to be, super high intensity exercise. Can what you eat make a difference? Well, to a certain extent. So, a generally healthy diet is going to be good for your sleep. So, we tend to find people that are having lots of variety in their diet, lots of plants in their diet, tend to sleep better. There isn't one food that will get you to sleep quicker. So, there are foods that help to increase your own melatonin production. So, melatonin is a hormone, you produce it in your pineal glands, which sits behind the eye. And you this produces melatonin which helps you fall asleep at the beginning of the night. It's an important part of your body clock, but there's different precursors. All of these foods will help develop melatonin. None of them will make you fall asleep. So although it's a really healthy approach and there's no harm to these things, they're not going to be the answer for your sleep. Okay, again, there's always bad news in my talks, but alcohol, unfortunately, does really disrupt sleep. And again, if you do use some kind of sleep tracker, you can start to see this yourself. Um, Interestingly, one drink for women can reduce sleep quality by 24%. And it fools us because alcohol can make us fall asleep easier. So it's quite a good sedative. You will fall asleep quicker after drinking a bit of alcohol. But it's what it does later in the night that's the problem. It will cause little micro wakings. We might not be aware of them, but we end up with poor quality sleep and often feel quite groggy the next day. It will also just snip out little bits of those rapid eye movement sleep, which can affect our emotional regulation the next day. And we can all think of that when we've had alcohol. So it's really something to think about. The only thing that you can do if you don't want to completely give up your alcohol is try and bring it a bit earlier. So this really makes a difference. So it's kind of like a happy hour cocktail rather than a nightcap. So it doesn't have to be no alcohol, but actually making it earlier will help your sleep. So just something to think about. What about supplements? So I'm always asked about sleep supplements, and there are a million things out there that you can try. The most popular is magnesium. So magnesium comes in all sorts of forms, and anecdotally, this will help some people. So we know that if people are really deficient in magnesium, if they're not getting enough in their diet, this can really affect sleep. So adding magnesium in can improve it. If you're not deficient and you have quite a healthy diet, will you benefit from magnesium? It's going to be really individual. So, what I would say is it's not going to do any harm to try it. So, I mean, most of the people I see with sleep problems have already tried magnesium. There's very little medical evidence to say it will help much. And certainly, if you've got a sleep disorder, something like insomnia disorder, then it's not going to be a treatment for that. It's not trying to be, it's a supplement. So it's kind of add-on. But it's not going to hurt to try. So it's something you can try. You can buy lots of sleep aids over the counter, and these are usually antihistamines. So, they're old-fashioned hay fever treatments, often used to make you drowsy, and that's what the sleep aids use. They're not ideal because they often give you next day side effects. So the whole point with making you sleep better is so you feel better in the day. And antihistamines often don't make you feel better. They're fine in short-term use, but if you're kind of resorting to them very often or over a longer term, it's really something to think about and talk to a doctor to see if there are good alternatives, because there are lots of different things out there. Some people say CBD is helpful. And actually, there isn't much evidence it helps with sleep, but it is good for anxiety. So we know some people who anxiety is getting in the way of sleep, it can be quite helpful. Um, and again, melatonin is something you can buy over the counter in America. Lots of people take melatonin, and that's something that it can help a little bit with sleep. It's not very powerful. In this country, in the UK, you have to get it on prescription, and it's only available for short-term use, and it's only licensed for over 55s, but it can sometimes have a little bit of an effect. So one of the things I'm asked about a lot is I fall asleep okay, but I do wake up in the night. And I think it's really important to say that it's actually really normal to have a little bit of a waking at the end of every sleep cycle. So every 90 minutes, you're coming out of a sleep cycle into very light sleep, and then you go into another cycle. So if you're having little wakings, it might be okay as long as you get back to sleep again. But if you're not getting back to sleep, it's worth really thinking about it. And the first question to ask yourself is, do you know why you're waking? Is it just out of the blue? Do you have pain? Do you feel sick? Do you need a wee? What's going on to make you wake? Um, it might not be obvious, but there might be something there we can kind of try and fix. Lying awake in the middle of the night is one of the most horrible things that people experience. So I think it's really important if you are struggling with being awake that you plan what you'll do. Okay, so just waiting for your brain that isn't working very well to take over is not fun. So try and give yourself something for your brain to do, almost like a distraction. And there's lots of different things. This is going to depend on the type of person you are and what you like. But some ideas are breathing exercises. I really like visualization. So, taking yourself on a kind of mental journey and going into great detail. I use shopping in Selfridges and think about all the nice leather bags and the scented candles. And essentially, it doesn't matter what it is, you're just taking your brain to do something else. You're not letting it freewheel and think without that really good prefrontal cortex there. You can use apps. There are some apps that have got sleep stories and kind of hypnotherapy, where someone's reading out a relaxing story, or all of these things can be useful. You've just got to find what works for you. And also, Try it in the day. Don't wait till night to decide what's good for you. Try things out, see what you might like. But if it's not working for you and you're just lying there and you're awake and you're feeling worried about that, just get up and go and do something else. It's really hard to do that, but it can make a big difference. It just breaks the habit. And when you're up, another cycle will come along and you'll start to feel sleepy again at some point, and then you can go back to bed. So you just want to wait for the next cycle to come along. We really say don't look at your clock, okay? If this is happening to you, focusing on your clock, thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to be up for work in 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever it is, it really, really makes things worse. And I've put, and this is really hard, but I've put don't think too much. Remember, nighttime is not for thinking. You are not going to be doing your best thinking. Try and do something, put your brain to something else. Um, and some of the techniques we use, so this is where people are really struggling. We actually have less time in bed. Okay, so this is the idea of getting up if you've been awake for too long. Sometimes we get people to go to bed a bit later, and it can really help because we want you to move from inefficient sleep to efficient sleep. And the other thing we sometimes try and do is get people to stop trying. Sounds really ridiculous, but often when we're struggling, we put loads of effort into sleep. We buy lots of things to help us sleep. We think about it a lot. And sometimes, honestly, the best thing to do is take the pressure off and just allow whatever is going to happen. It's funny, sometimes that can really help as well. I know it's hard. So, these techniques form part of one of the treatments we use for insomnia called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. It's the first line treatment and it has all sorts of different techniques in it, but I'm just giving you a bit of a flavor of sometimes some of the things that we use. Okay, so what about when sleep has gone wrong? And so hopefully there's lots of you that just want to tweak your sleep a little bit, get it better, but there might be some of you that are really struggling, and that's what I really want to focus on just in the last few minutes. And we can then hopefully answer some questions if you have any. So, stress can make a big impact on sleep. For that reason, we talked about the sympathetic nervous system gets activated, our brain remains hyper alert. Often people say they are tired but really wired, their brain just won't settle down. And try to think if you are stressed and it's impacting on your sleep, think about little things you can do to help shift from that daytime to nighttime. One of the techniques I really like is putting the day to rest. You literally close down the day, you write down a little bit of a journaling about what's gone on, and you leave it there. And you allow yourself just to move on to the nighttime and make it a really different space. There's technology can be useful, give you a bit of distraction, a bit of nice relaxing TV. Don't stop yourself having screens if it's helpful. And also sometimes a body scan. Again, you can Google these on YouTube. There's lots of different body scan audios that you can use. I always just mention menopause. There's so many aspects to menopause that can affect sleep. And if you're struggling, we need to think, are your symptoms really well treated? Are you having night sweats or are you getting up to wee? Or all these things can affect it. And so if you're struggling with sleep and menopause, this is what I do in my clinics every day. Is we start thinking, have we got your symptoms solved? Are we using the best type of HRT for you? Or have we tried progesterone, which will help some people? Also, making sure that we're treating the bladder with vaginal estrogen, because often it's about getting up because you need a wee. So, there's all sorts of things we can do to optimize your menopause management. Make sure you're not drinking fluids too late in the evening. But what about sleep disorders? So, there are lots of different sleep disorders, but these are the three most common. Chronic insomnia, where you've had sleep problems for 3 nights a week for 3 months or more. Obstructive sleep apnea, which we need to think about if you're snoring or you're waking up with a breathing issue, and restless leg syndrome. So if you have this feeling like you want to move your legs around a lot, there's help for that, and it's really worth mentioning that to your doctor because you can have a blood test. It's often related to iron, and there are treatments available. Just quickly, if you are suffering with chronic insomnia, please seek help. Once you develop insomnia, cutting out caffeine, these little techniques we've got, they're not going to do the job. If it's been going on a while, it forms a habit in your brain and you need help to break that habit. So the first line treatment is called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. It takes about 6 weeks. It's not always easy. It's like personal training. It can be difficult to do, but it's so effective. It works for 70% of people. You can do it using different digital apps. So these are three of the most popular. Sleepful is free, the other two you pay for. You can have a look at them. There are also private clinics like the Good Sleep Clinic that I founded that have sleep specialist psychologists that can take you through these different retraining programs. But there are also brilliant medications. It's not the old fashioned sleeping tablets anymore. We've got new medications that aren't addictive, that don't make you feel groggy in the day. They've just been out 2 or 3 years. So if you're struggling, please, please seek help because there's an awful lot we can usually treat chronic insomnia. What about snoring and sleep apnea? So, obstructive sleep apnea and snoring. Snoring is related to the kind of tissues of the upper airway compressing the airway, so you get this loud snoring sound. And if it compresses it and it blocks the airway, then it sends a message to your brain that you really need to wake up to get you breathing properly again. And that's what happens in obstructive sleep apnea. We see loud snoring, pauses in breathing. Sometimes people get morning headaches, reduced concentration, lots of different symptoms. And it's strongly linked to weight. We often see that when you lose weight, these symptoms can improve. But if you're having these symptoms, we really want to know about it. And what we would do is try and do a sleep study. So we used to do these in the sleep lab, take you to a hospital, make you stay the night. Now we do them at home. They're really easy. You just get a little finger monitor, wrist monitor, sometimes a chest strap. Sometimes it's even just a little thing. This is an pebble that you put on your neck. It's really important to find it because if you have sleep apnea, you will feel so much better if it's treated. It also has an impact on your long-term health. If you don't know that you snore or not, you can actually get an app called the Snore Lab and it just records overnight to see if you snore and it will give you an idea of how that snoring is. There are lots of different treatments for sleep apnea. So these are the kind of red flags. If you're snoring heavily, if you are really sleepy in the daytime, if you have restless legs, and if your lack of sleep is impacting on your functioning, please see someone and get help because there's lots we can do about all these things. So that's me. I'm going to finish up now. If you do have any questions, I think we've got a few minutes to put them in the chat. Please do put them in. But really, the message from me is don't put up with sleep problems. You can seek help. Even if you're not having a sleep problem, there's lots we can do to improve our sleep. Um, there's all of those kind of links for CBTI, which can help insomnia. But just for a bit of general sleep information, there's a couple of great podcasts. The Matthew Walker podcast is brilliant. And there's a really good book called The Sleep Solution as well. So I hope that's been helpful for some of you. Um, I'm going to just stop sharing my slides. Um, and I think the chat might be open for questions.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much, Zoe. So we've now turned on the chat function. If anyone wants to send any questions for the last few minutes that we have Zoe here, feel free to do so.
Great, I'm just gonna have a little drink. Okay, I can start to see a couple of questions. Thank you. Well, I'm glad if it was informative. Thanks. Right, can you explain more about heat? I like a hot bath. Oh, sorry, just trying to scroll down. I like a hot bath and hot water bottle. It helps me relax. How does this affect sleep? Okay, so in an ideal world, your core body temperature will drop to allow you to be asleep and to stay asleep. Okay. So, one of the it's like a hack to make that happen is to heat the outside of your body up and it will draw heat out. So that's why we go red if we're in the bath, because our blood vessels are trying to give away heat and give off heat. So we can go a little bit red, our skin will feel a little bit warmer, but our actual inside temperature drops. So it's called the hot bath effect. So if you like to do this, perfect. You're doing it already. So a hot bath, what it will do is when you get out, your body is giving off heat and it will drop your core body temperature which is a great trigger for sleep. So naturally, we want our temperature to drop, and you're encouraging it to do it. A hot water bottle could do exactly the same thing. So when you're holding it, you can be drawing out heat from your body, to the hot water bottle. Just be careful. If with a hot water bottle, over time it could sort of heat you up a little bit. And if you struggle to fall asleep, then it might be better to try and have a cooler sleep environment. But if you're sleeping fine and you fall asleep fine, it's all great. So hopefully that helps. Um, Let me just see if, sorry, it's just not scrolling down very well. Bear with me. Can you give more information regarding dry mouth on waking, please? Okay. So if you have a dry mouth on waking, it might be because overnight. So what we really want to do is breathe through our nose. Okay, so there's advantages for breathing through our nose most of the time, but particularly at night time. So when you breathe through your nose, the air gets sort of cleaned by the nose, and it kind of activates important mechanisms. So if you wake up with your mouth that's dry, it kind of suggests, are you sleeping with your mouth open? And is that because there's any kind of blockage in your nose? Are you snoring? And how do you feel about your sleep? So if it's just a bit of a dry mouth, but your sleep seems fine, you've got enough energy and there's no other issues, don't worry too much about it. It can be related to any medications as well, so just check that out. But actually, if you're not sure, if you think actually my sleep is a bit disturbed or I might be snoring, or you could use that snore lab just to check if you're not sure, then that is a sign you should get checked out. So it's a clue. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong, but it's a clue. And if there are some other clues there, you should go and speak to somebody. Um, okay, thank you. I wake. Oh, hold on. Sorry, this scrolling thing. Let me just see if there's a way I can make this better. Oh, here we go. Got it. Um, About once a week, I get so tired, I need a power nap in the afternoon. I try to avoid it, but sometimes I can't avoid it. What's the optimum time to stay awake? Naps aren't necessarily bad, so there's lots of advantages to a nap. If you can nap, great. Um, Honestly, half an hour is about what we're going for because we're trying not to get you into the two deep stages of sleep. So half an hour is enough to get some benefit and not adversely affect your sleep at night. My only question is, why are you getting so tired? And if you're struggling with your nighttime sleep, then napping isn't a good solution for that. If it's just the odd thing and it helps you get through the day and gives you energy, fine. But is there a reason why you're sleepy? And I suppose that I just would think about that first. But half an hour naps are brilliant. Someone else has asked, is napping during the day a big no-no if you feel tired? Yeah, I've heard you can nap. Now, again, if you feel tired and if you feel sleepy, you should nap. It can be brilliant. If you can nap, it can be brilliant. It can boost your brain power after a nap. There's loads of studies to say, we do better after a nap. Um, 20 to 30 minutes is ideal. Okay, so that's perfect. Any more than that, it's harder to wake up from. So you get into those deeper stages of sleep. And also, it can start impacting on your nighttime. So it's not a no-no, but again, just ask yourself, is my nighttime sleep okay? Is there a reason why I'm struggling? If not, go for it. Naps are brilliant. I drink a lot of Diet Coke. How much will this affect sleep? I have chronic insomnia. Okay, so Diet Coke, unfortunately, does have quite a lot of caffeine in it. Um, and I think if you've got chronic insomnia, I would try just to limit it to the morning hours. It's really tough. And maybe you could think about, think about a fizzy drink that's not got caffeine in it. I'm not sponsored by Dash Water, but could you supplement it for something that doesn't have caffeine but still gives you a sense of a boost? So, like, investigate herbal teas or fizzy, non-caffeinated drinks. I think if you've got chronic insomnia, it's not going to be fixed by stopping Diet Coke. And I don't want you to stop doing something you enjoy, but it could be suppressing your sleep drive. And you want to give yourself a best chance. If you've got chronic insomnia, you've got a suppressed sleep drive anyway, and we want to try and help with that. So it's not ideal. Could you find an alternative? But also get help for your insomnia. Um, My husband struggles to sleep, which has a knock-on effect on me. Oh, absolutely. He's annoyed I sleep so easy. Oh my gosh. When someone doesn't sleep well, having someone that sleeps well is so annoying. It drives them crazy. He's going for an ADHD diagnosis, age 56. Do you think his lack of sleep is connected to ADHD? Well, ADHD can impact on sleep in a couple of ways. Particularly, it's often a body clock disruption. So, people with ADHD often have a slightly later body clock or a different body clock, and that can make sleep harder. So, sometimes identifying that can really help. He might also have insomnia. So I don't know quite what's going on, but sometimes insomnia is a problem. But it's really tricky when you have someone that's not sleeping well. So it's the same with people who sleep with someone who snores or who has restless legs. And if he's not sleeping, it will have a knock-on impact on you. One thing that's very sort of controversial, but we talk about all the time is sometimes separate beds is really good for everybody's sleep. So if it's something you have the option of, it shouldn't say anything bad about your relationship. You can still get into bed together to be intimate, do all those sorts of things. But there are lots of couples out there that have just found that actually protecting their own sleep space is the best thing. This is controversial. Not everyone loves that idea, but it can be really, really helpful. It's certainly something we encourage when it's helpful. Okay. Why does a weighted blanket help? So, weighted blankets, there is some evidence for some people they can help, and not for everybody. Again, everybody sleep different, but weighted blankets, they can be really heavy. You get the right weight for you, and you feel very safe and secure under a weighted blanket, and it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's why. Now, it won't work for everybody. This is a very specific thing, but I know lots of people really like the feeling. It's the same reason you swaddle a baby, you give them a sense of comfort and safety. And it can be really brilliant. There are a few studies that suggest, yeah, for some people this is going to be really, really good. Some people would hate them. So some people, particularly if they feel hot, often in menopause, they're a real no-no. And some people just feel too constricted. But if you like it, it's really good. Um, okay. Disturbed sleep for years. Oh, I'm so sorry you're having that. And you have a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. I'm sorry that you're going through this. I wake on average 3 times a night, find it very hard to get back to sleep. I'm in pain constantly, so struggle to get comfortable and have vivid dreams. Okay, so there's lots going on here, but these things should be looked at, and I hope that you can seek some support with it because your sleep is important. So sometimes it gets kind of, you focus on everything else, don't you? You don't focus on the sleep. But actually, what I would suggest in this situation is number one, is there anything obvious you can do about the pain? You might have tried that, but sometimes just a bit of, a few painkillers before bed can be really, really helpful. And it just helps keep you asleep for a little bit longer. So that's just something to think about. But also, if vivid dreams are a problem, I would sometimes that's a sign that actually it can be a sign of sleep apnea, but it can be a sign that there's other things going on and there are lots of different techniques. It sounds as though you could have chronic insomnia alongside these other things. And cognitive behavioral approaches can be good, but also sleeping medication. So we shouldn't be fearful of treating sleep. Sleep's important. And when you sleep better, other things get better, right? We know people cope with pain better. You've got other health issues that if you slept better, it might help you. So consider just getting checked out for these things. Okay. Um, Take chamomile tea every day for sleep. Is it bad to take it every day? I was told it will slow down my brain alerts. No, it's fine. No, 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 it won't. It won't do anything. It's not a powerful sedative. And actually, if chamomile, it might be part of a ritual. Your brain might have kind of associated chamomile tea with a kind of sense of sleepiness and relaxation. Please do not worry. That is a really safe thing to do. If it works for you, crack on. Honestly, that's lovely. It really isn't a problem. Um, at what point should I consider medication? When I'm under 55 or further assessment. So if a lack of sleep is impacting on your day-to-day functioning, so we talked so much about how important sleep was. I'm sorry to go on about it, but it is. So if you are affected, if you're finding that in the daytime, you're tired, you're emotional, you're not thinking properly because you think you're not getting enough sleep, get an assessment. In terms of insomnia, we normally say medication is worth thinking about if CBTI doesn't work. Now, that's not always the order we go in, but I would usually say, look, could we try something without medication first? Some people can't, some people it doesn't work, and then medication's on the table. But we want to explore the things that don't need medication in the first instance, usually. It's not, everybody's different, but that's usually right. So now, if you're struggling, that's the right time to get an assessment, okay? Um, Okay. Oh, I know. Sorry, Avery's come on. I think that we're coming to the end of the questions. I was just seeing
Yeah, no,
if,
feel free to take a few more and we'll wrap it up
okay,
in a few
okay,
minutes. Thank
okay. Is there any correlation between coming off certain drugs, e.g., tramadol, and insomnia? And yes, because sometimes different medications, like different painkillers, sometimes different antidepressants, they can have a sedative effect on our brain. So while you're taking them, it's kind of working to dull our brain a little bit at night, which might be fine. But when you stop them, you suddenly have lost that dulling effect and your brain feels more alert and it might keep you awake. Now, it often settles on its own, but sometimes you might need a little bit of help. Sometimes it's why we come off things very gradually and taper things down slowly. So if you notice that shift, it's really real and you can seek help. There's a couple of questions about snoring, and I want to just go back to that because snoring is important. Okay. Now, mild snoring might not be a problem. Okay. So it's not always bad. But what snoring is, it's a sign that your upper airway may have something constricting it. Okay. So if your snoring is loud, if you wake up with your snoring, if someone else is waking up with your snoring, then you should have an assessment because it could be a sign of sleep apnea. And sleep apnea is super important. If you're snoring, you go and get an assessment and they say, no, it's not sleep apnea, it's just a bit of snoring. You're fine. It's okay. It's just one of those things. And sometimes sleeping in a different position, sometimes losing weight, all of those things can help. But it is an important sign that something else might be going on. So if it's loud snoring, particularly if you ever feel sleepy in the day, or you ever wake up gasping for breath, you must go and get an assessment. Your GP will go through questions with you. There's a kind of screening questionnaire, and then you can be referred for a sleep study. And it's really worth doing because it honestly it can make you feel amazing if you treat sleep apnea, if that's what's going on. Okay. I think I will stop there, Avery. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Zoe. That was so wonderful, very informative. I learned a lot tonight. But we have come to the end of our time. Thank you, everyone who attended tonight and for taking the time out of your night to join us. Just keep an eye out on your email, the SheMed app, and the Facebook group if you're a member, just because we'll be posting updates there and we have a lot of exciting webinars planned for the future. So thank you, Zoe, and everyone have a great evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Bye bye.